Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial, we are going to finish the up the level select screen that we had. So we created a map. So a lot of this we restructured our script, or actually created a different script for our character to be able to move horizontally as well as vertically. And then we added our colliders into our level selects, what is going to be the level selects. So we're going to look at doing the scripting or creating some scripts that will allow us to unlock the levels when you hit space and to enter the levels, and then to unlock them when you complete them. Alright, as you can see from the last video, I did add in a number of things into the map just in terms of what you can do, right? So we can add in some bridges, you can add in the water, so that was in the other tile layers that, where we added our desert one. There's some with water, some with darker grass, and so on. Similarly, I added the darker grass here to make this seem more like a darker forest, and then the mountains and so on. So one of the things that you should notice is that so for example, look at those mountains, right? So this spot here is going to give you that, and then you can use this to paint in the sides and so on. Right, so that'll give you the side of that mountain, and then the top of here and so on. So that's kind of how you piece these together. For the trees, I added in a few more layers, and it's really just painting them in. So start painting them into the midground, because again, you want your background to be this dark grass color, and then kind of move up and move the trees as you add more, right? So if I paint one into the front, for example, then you want to kind of line it up and if I paint it over top of another one in the front, it's going to put that grass layer over top of the tree. And that's where, right, so if I have, so if you have them in the midground, and then, so for example here, now that's going to be over top of, so this tree, it's not painting over, so I have these in different layers and so on. Anyway, so those are things that you just play with until you get it to look the way you want it, and then that's great. As always, you can just double check if you're creating a map, kind of moving on, and you can always just go back and double check. So you can turn off the colliders. So level 1 select, I just turned off the circle colliders. So you could just go through and just make sure that, okay, yeah, it works. I can move up through that path. I can't move off the path. And it's just double checking to make sure that you were in the right layers. I know as I've created these maps and so on, oftentimes what happens is you're painting, and then you're doing your foreground, which has our collisions, and then okay, I've got to do something there. So then you go to the midground or somewhere else into a different layer, and then you paint, and then you forget to go back to the foreground. So these end up not being colliders or something like that. So you can just always go back and double check those. So anyways, I'm going to turn the colliders back on, and so let's just turn these colliders back on before I forget. And what we're going to be doing is, so we'll do this in the level 1. We're going to create a script. So we're going to add a new script, and we're going to call it level control. And we'll create and add that script. Okay, so in the script, there's a few things once you have it open. So we're going to have to create a variable. We're going to create it, so a serialized field, and we are going to create, in this case, we're going to just create a private string, and what we're doing is creating a string for scene to load, right? So we want to be able to use the same script. We don't want to just say load scene 1 and then loads, or else you'd have to change the script and have multiple kind of scripts on different levels. So this will create a string in the inspector that will allow you to, when you attach this script to each of the levels, you can tell the inspector, okay, this is level 1, so we're going to load scene 1 or scene 2 and so on. So as with before, and again, I haven't done this, so we're on an older one, so I do have a number of warnings and cautions, but remember, we want to make this equal to null in order to not get those warnings that it hasn't been assigned and so on. And then we're also going to create a serialized field, and we're going to create a private int, and we're going to call this the level check. So we're going to check to see if the level has been unlocked or not. So this will allow us to kind of open up the new levels and so on. And then similarly, we also want to create a serialize field, and we're going to create a bool, so a private bool. Too many O's, so a private bool, and we'll call it level trigger. And we're going to set this equal to false. So what this is going to do, it's going to allow us to, so when you move onto the trigger and you hit the space, you're going to be able to enter the level. But we want to be able to turn that trigger off. When we leave the trigger, it's going to be able to set that to false. So we'll just go back to here. In our start, we don't need anything just yet anyway. So what we're going to do is, so in the update, we're going to set our thing. So we want to first, so if the level trigger, so if we're on the trigger, basically, what do we want to happen? So if we're on the level trigger, and if we input dot get key code dot space, then we want to, so if you're on the trigger and we hit spacebar, we want to load the level. So if we're on the trigger and if we hit the spacebar, we're going to get the scene manager, and then we're going to load scene. And the scene we're going to load is our, what we're going to refer to in the inspector. So we're going to find the actual scene that we want to load. And that's it for that. And then from there we want to, so void on trigger, enter 2D, and collider 2D, and we'll call this call. And then we want to say, so if the collision, so if our collision, if collision dot compare tag, now if collision with the game object dot compare tag, and then in brackets is our player, then we're just going to say level trigger equals true. Right? And then we want to be able to turn that level trigger off so that we can, so it doesn't trigger when we're not on the level. So I'm going to just copy this down, and this is void on trigger exit. Right? So if we exit the trigger, and if we're exiting, if it's our player that's exiting the trigger, then we're going to set the level trigger to false. And that'll turn the trigger off. So we can, oh, and then we also need to add, and I almost forgot that, so using Unity engine dot scene management. Right, so we need to do that in order to activate those scenes. So we'll save this. Okay, once it's saved and compiled, so we can now look at, so in our level 1, so our scene to load in the inspector, this is where we're going to load scene 1. Right, and that's it. And then again, remember in your build settings, we need to make sure that we have all of these added in. So I actually don't have the map scene in there. Again, I could rearrange these. Eventually I do want, this will be my first scene, and then scene 1, scene 2, and so on. So that's all you need to do for that. So just make sure they're added in there. So now we should be able to play this. And when we move and hit the, and actually we will look at it. So I can move over, and if I move over, you can see down here, this level trigger is true. So I hit space, it should load the level. If I move off of it, the level trigger is false. And if I hit space, you can't. Oh, actually, that speaks to something else. Right, so when we turn the gravity off, you can see that the player slides a lot, and that's because there's virtually no friction because it's not hitting the walls and so on. So what we want to do is, so our player, we can change the linear drag to a higher value. So let's just say 10, and now when you move, you kind of stop. So that'll just create the drag that's not there because there's no friction, because we're not moving in terms of on top of the land. So anyway, so we enter the trigger, hit space, And there we go. So it loads level 1, and that's great. So then we go next level, and we haven't changed any of that. So that's kind of what we want. So we can hit the trigger, it enters, and we can load the level. So that's the first step. Okay, so back in this scene here, we do want to now be able to only really unlock the levels if we have the level completed, right? So if we complete level 1, then it's going to unlock the collider essentially and allow us to move to level 2. Because remember, we do have the collider here that we need to turn off in order to be able to get by this and get to level 2. So what we're going to do is, and that's where this level check is going to come in. So in our start menu, because again, every time we load back into this, it's going to get this, and then it's going to look at and basically turn those colliders off depending on the levels you've completed. So we want to do if, and there's a number of scripts we're going to need to change here. So if permanent stats dot persist. So if our permanent stats dot persist dot level, so we'll call this level completed, is greater than our level check. Nope, that's not what I want. I want the level check one. So if it's greater than our level check, then what do we want? We want to be able to turn the collider off. So we're going to get the component, and we're going to get the circle collider, right? So basically what's happening is, so we're on this level, it's checking to see if the level has been completed. It's not, so the collider stays there. However, once we complete the level, our level completed is going to be greater than the level check, and then it's going to get our component, which is the circle collider. So get component circle collider 2D, and we're going to set this to .enabled, and we're going to make it equal to false. Right, so that's going to, what it's going to do is then turn off. So if we go to level 1, it's going to, so gets the circle collider 2D component, and then this is so enabled and not enabled. So it's going to say enabled is false, which is going to turn the collider off. And then now I can move past there and get to level 2. So that's it for that. So we can save that. And now we need to go and reference in our permanent stats. Yeah, that's fine. So this error is because we haven't created in our permanent stats. So we're going to go to our permanent stats, and we got to edit the script here. And we can just up here, and again, this is slightly different from what we had before. So the other one, we've added a few other things as well, but that's fine. So what we're going to add in this one is our level completed, right? So we want to add a public int level completed equals 0. And that's it. So level completed equals 0. So we can save this. So file, save our permanent stats. Now it's referencing, or now this null exception should go away. And now we need to be able to add to that when we complete the levels. So to do that, what we're going to do is change our finish. No, not the finish screen we want. Oh, and I'm not going to be able to do that. Oh, I can do it here in the scripts. So on our finish flags, I'll save this. So let's just save it. And we can go into, so let's go to our scene 1, just so I can kind of go over what we're doing. So what we want to do is when we hit our finish flag, we want to be able to add to say that the level has been completed. So, and I could have done this just straight from our scripts, but just to kind of show you where we're doing this. So in our finish script, so we're going to edit the script. And we want to, on collision, we're going to set our finish screen .setActive there. And then we also want to add, so our permanent stats dot persist dot what did I call it? Completed. So level completed So dot level completed plus plus, right? So that's going to add one now whenever we hit the finish flag. And you don't have to do this on every level. So if you have multiple levels set up already, that's fine. You don't need to add it to all of them because we added it in the script. It's going to automatically do that in those levels. The other thing that we want to change as well is so currently when we hit the finish flag, it brings up the finish screen. And then in the finish screen, it's going to allow us to, and I'm only going to do this here, you will have to change it in your other, so game over pause to go back to, and so on. But currently though, in our finish screens, we're going to edit the script. And instead of loading, so next level, instead of loading the next level, we're going to load the map scene. So we're going to load the map scene. And I think that's what I called it, I'm pretty sure. So just to double check, yep, so map scene. We're going to load our map scene and that's it. So we can save that. And I think that's everything. Okay, so we'll try playing here and see. Oh, I don't want to play from here. Okay, so I just exited, I just paused it for a minute and I exited that. So we want to play from our map scene and just make sure everything works. So we can move along. So that's great. I can hit space. It's not, oh, and I know why I'm sliding because when I changed it, remember if you change the value in when you're playing the game, it doesn't change. So when you're stopped, you have to do it there, but that's fine, I'll leave it for now. So I can collide with this, I can't move by it, hit space, get to the level. So say next level, and we can just check to make sure that that's showing up. So now it's saying level completed equals 1. So now I can move. And that level is now unlocked. So now I can get to level 2 and the same thing. So I can hit space. Oh, I can't do that yet because, so now what you would have to do is add your scripts to each of the levels, right? So we have our scripts down here. So let's just get level 2 open here for a second. And so our level control script, so I want to add that to level 2. So just make sure, so we're level 2, so we would want to load scene 2 now, and so on. And that's essentially the basic process of this. And this works great the way it is. So one of the things that you would notice is that as we keep playing, so if I play through, I'm going to add another little bit to this to get us to go back to the level that we had just completed. So right now I hit space, so I can go finish the level, go next level, and it resets you back at the beginning, right? Same thing if I go up to here, so we can go into level 2. So finish the level, go next level, and it resets us back here, right? So early on in the game, this would be fine to some extent. However, if you're way over here, you wouldn't want to have to go back here and then go all the way back through to do the next level and then go all, and so on. So we're going to add another little thing to this. So what we want to do is get our permanent stats, or sorry, we want to get the location of these here, right? So on our level control script, so we're going to edit the script again. And we want to set those X and Y values. So what we want to do, so where you can just create a serialize field, and we're going to create a private float, and let's just call this X. No, let's call it play X, and we'll just set it to 0 for now, and these we'll have to set. And then similarly, we're going to do the same thing, but create a Y value. So copy that, apply Y, and we'll set it to 0 as well. So we'll save this. Okay, so we want to be able to save those X, Y values. So we want to go into our permanent stats, and let's create a public float and we will call it player X. And again, let's just set it to 0 for now. And we're going to create a public float, and we will call it player Y equals 0f. And we can save that. Now, I guess currently, I probably should have just looked at this. So what we want to do is our initial player is set to, let that compile. So where is our initial player transform? And that's where we're using these XY values for. So our player currently is at minus 3.7. And so, yeah, because we want to go, you want to make sure that you don't error on that side and end up in the collider, or else your player will be stuck. So for example, when you're over here, you'd want to error to the left, and so on. So anyway, so we'll say minus 3.7 and minus 8.15. So currently we're at minus 3.7 and minus 8.15. And we'll set that in the inspector. So that's our current kind of transform. So what we want to be able to do is, as we hit this collider, so this collider is at 6.31. So you can usually just use the values that are in the where your transform, like where this transform is. So 6.31 and minus 8.42, and that should be fine. So that will set our player. So now again, we want to go back into, and we want to take these values and make these our new transform. So we can go back to our scripts. Okay, so in our scripts, so in our level control, so we want to call this only when we trigger, but also only when we enter the level. So void on trigger if we, so up here, so if we are on the trigger and if we hit the space key, we're going to load the scene. But we also want to change our permanent, sort of those permanent stats, so set this is our new transform. So we're going to say permanent stats dot persist dot, I forget what I called it now. So player X, equals, and this is going to change it to our, what we have on our script there. So it's just the play X, and then similarly, we are going to just copy that, paste it down here, so our player Y, and it's going to change it to our play Y. All right, so we can save this. So again, just to go over this code, so what we're doing, so we're going to enter the trigger, we hit space, okay, I'll have to, oh, I have a spelling error there. That's why this should be player Y. So save that again. So what is happening is we hit the trigger and then we hit space. So it's going to, so currently our permanent stats says that our transform is here. So we hit the trigger, we hit space, it's going to change our permanent stats to the location of, so what we have on our play X, right? So our play X is now going to be our player X position, and the play Y is going to be our player Y position. So when we finish the level, we want to then, when we load back into the scene, we're going to set our transform to this spot. So in order to do that, we now need to change our player script, so our player map controller script, and we want to set our, so on the start, and you only need to call this once, so when we load the map scene, it's going to do this with the script. So it's going to take our map controller script, it's going to read through it, so on the start, we're going to set our transform. So we want our player no, actually we don't need to say that, so because we're in our player script, so transform dot position equals new vector 2, And we're going to set this to our permanent stats dot player x and the permanent stats dot player y. Right, so it's going to now, this is our new position. So when we load the map scene, whatever is stored in our permanent stats as our player X and player Y position, that's where our character is going to spawn or be created. So we're going to save that. And sorry, I forgot to put, so permanent stats dot persist dot player X and permanent stats dot persist dot player Y. So again, we'll save that. And now this should be, no, what did I do? Okay, so I have my player XY as lowercase p, so that's kind of my error there. So p, and then again, it should be lowercase player y. Let's try this again. Maybe the third time will be the charm. So save that. And we should be able to go in and hopefully everything works great. So we can save that, so we can push play. And now when we go in, and we can kind of look at these as we go through it. So I'm going to actually get my permanent stats so that don't destroy, just so that we can sort of see what's happening. So again, our player XY position, so that's where we start. So we move over, and now when we, again, we're stuck, so we hit space, so that takes us to the level. And then if you notice, so our player XY position did change. So we can finish the level, go next level, and now put us into this spot where we want to be. And our level completed is 1. So same thing, we could go, so move up. Do I not? I must not have the collider on that because I didn't turn it back on. So again, you can see our, oh, I didn't change that, that's why. Okay, so we'll just stop that, we'll go back in, and I'm going to actually just turn the collider. The circle collider is on, so why did I go through it? Oh, I know I went through it because I need to set my, so this level check you want to be 1, right? So our level 1 is set to 0, then we complete level 1, and then that makes our level check and so on, right? So in terms of our script, so level 2 is actually set to level check 1, so is level 1 completed? It's one way to look at it. And so on. So anyway, so level 1 or level check is 1, and then same thing, we want to reset our transform. So the x, so our new x would be 6.31 and minus 4.18. And that's great. So now let's go back in and we will play it, and this should work perfect. Okay, so again, move over, hit space, get to the level, complete the level, go to the next level, and that's awesome, right? So now we're there, and we're stuck, we can hit space, and if we kind of just look, so our, well, we don't need to really look, but you can, again, you can check to make sure those are changing, but now when we complete this level, we should be able to be on level 2, and then we start here, and now that's unlocked, and then you can continue on and go complete the other levels. So awesome, that's perfect. This works great. So again, it's just remembering to, so on each of your levels, you just need to find the new transform, reset those, and that's great. Everything works awesome. So again, thanks for tuning in, and that's it for this video. So hopefully I'll see you in some of the future videos as I work on other game development aspects.